Okay, in this video I'm going to talk to you about paintbrushes before we get started with anything this year. I'm going to show you some of the paintbrushes that we have in our art classroom to use. We have a few different ones, not a lot, but a few different ones. So you can see we have a big one that is a flat brush with a flat tip on the top of it. And this one is more of a rounded brush with a little bit of a tip on it. And then these two are also flat brushes, and they have a flat tip on them, but they're a little bit smaller than the bigger ones. All these brushes serve a good purpose, and I'm going to show you the best way to utilize these so that you don't struggle with that as you're painting on projects this year. So the first brush I'm going to start with is obviously the big one. This brush is going to be used for covering a lot of space at one time. So it's really not good if you're wanting to cover a small space at one time. This brush, after you put paint on it, is going to spread out quite a bit. You'll see it spreads out pretty far as you paint with it. So if you're wanting to cover a small space, this is not a good brush to use, because as you put paint on it, it will spread out wider, so it will cover more area. You see, I covered quite a bit of area with just a few strokes. The next brush is going to be the pointed one. This one is good if you want to cover in areas that curve or that you want to have wider areas with. It's still not a good brush for small type spaces. And I'll show you this one. It gives a nice smooth curve with this brush. But you see the paint on it, as you put the paint on this brush, it also will spread out quite a bit. So it's going to cover quite a bit of area itself as you're painting with it. So this is good for several things, but not for tight spaces. I personally don't like to use these brushes on tight spaces and straight edges because they spread out so much. This way, with this brush, it's better to use things like coloring in circles. You can get the edges better because it does kind of spread more of in a circular motion. Now the last brush I want to show you, well, these last two actually, they're the same type of brush. One's just a little bit bigger than the other. I usually use one of these two brushes for a lot of the painting that I do. Especially, I use the smaller one for smaller edges and getting in smaller spaces. And you can see this one doesn't spread out nearly as much, and would take you forever to cover the whole back of a page if you were going to color in a background with it, because it doesn't take up much space as you're using it. The thing I do like about these flat brushes, though, is that if you're going to edge something, you can hold it up straight. Let me do it around this circle here, and you can see it better. See how nice of an edge that you can get with this straight edge brush by holding it just upright? And get a nice clean edge around something. And it's not going to spread out too far to make your edge really wide. So see how nice that can look? You just have to have a little patience as you're edging with it. And make sure you don't want to get too much paint on it, because then it'll make the bristles thicker and stretched out. Now this is the brush that I would probably prefer that you're going to use as you're doing your color wheel, because there's going to be smaller spaces to be using for this. So at this time, I'm going to show you, now that you've used your brushes, how to properly clean and store your paint brushes.